Hi, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday night loving kindness meditation and story time. So you get both of those tonight. My name is Alex. It's wonderful to be here with you. I love all of you that have decided to listen in on story time and also do a loving kindness meditation. Hello. If you're new here to the Darwin Temple, feel free to say hi in the chat box. If you're not new, feel free to say hi in the chat box. It's wonderful to hear from you. And so, yes, this is going to be a little bit new. So we're going to do this loving kindness meditation. We're going to have story time. And story time is something that I used to do like one Sunday a month. I would spend an hour and just tell Buddhist stories, and I tell a lot of them. And it all started many years ago when Jeff asked me to tell the Buddha story to kids at, I think it was King Chavez High School in downtown, Chavez High School, and that's a high school for like at-risk kids, and so I think I knew one of the teachers there, or I got to know one of the teachers there, and so I went there and I told the story, and I think it took me about 15 minutes. I was super nervous. I knew the story, but I hadn't told it before in front of a group. So that was a lot of fun, and I told it again the next year or maybe a few months later to another group, I think. I can't really remember. And then I just started telling it regularly. Maybe like once a year, once every 6 months at the temple. And it was super fun. I got really into it. And, for me, some people like facts and figures and, things like that, and they learn well like that. And, different people learn different ways. For me, if you tell me a story, I will learn. If you start telling me a story and engaging me in the story, I will sit and I will listen and I will absorb all this information. Because when the temple first opened, and this is like 2007, we had somebody come in and tell stories all the time and talk to us about a lot of the basics about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and like the Sanskrit meanings of different words and things like that. And it was very scholastic, and I really liked that a lot. But anyway, so if you're new again, just say hi. So we're going to have the shorter loving kindness meditation first. It's only going to be about maybe 15 minutes or so because this Buddha story takes me a little bit of time to tell. Back in the day, like I said, when I was talking to the high school group, it took me about 15 minutes to tell this story. And then it was 20, and then it was 30, and then it was 35, and then it was 45. And I think the last time, the longest it ever took me was like about an hour. And it's fun. And it's not like I'm adding facts or I'm adding information that wasn't there. It's just that I'm remembering more of the story and I'm engaging in more of the story. So let's do a little meditation first on loving kindness. Oh, God. We could be grateful for so much, even though there's a lot of difficulty out there in the world. There's a way to counter that. A way to counter that kind of delusion and hatred that we see out there is with this practice of loving kindness. And so, this loving kindness is really a wish to be happy, a wish for us to be happy, a wish for others to be happy, but more importantly, it's a wish for us and others to do the things that cause happiness. To do the things that cause happiness. And that is our positive thoughts, words, and deeds. Like it says on the back of this shirt, speak good thoughts, speak good words, think good thoughts, do good deeds, right? So, and that is a spiritual practice that predates Buddhism. It goes back to the oldest known monotheistic religion in the world. Even before Christianity, before Judaism, there was something called Zoroastrianism. And it's still a religion that's practiced, and that was their motto. That was their motto. That's what they lived by. That was their spiritual practice. So, and we do that today. So, all right. We do this in a little bit of a modified way, and so we're going to go really quickly through this. So let's see how we do. All right, so let's make sure that we have this nice and comfortable seated position. So if you're seated on a chair or the edge of your bed, you just want to make sure that your feet are flat on the floor with your legs a few inches apart. Your hands can be anywhere that's comfortable, so I put them in my lap or on my leg. My back is nice and straight, so my back isn't actually against the back of the seat here. So my back is nice and straight. And if you remember anything, just remember to keep your back nice and straight. And so like what I like to do is I like to make my back super duper straight and then just kind of relax, still with my core engaged, somewhat keeping my back straight. But if you find yourself slumping or schlumping or whatever it is during the meditation, it's okay just to stand up again or just to straighten your back again. All right. Head is nice and straight, and your eyes can be closed. Your eyes can be halfway open, looking 45 degrees down past your nose. Some people like to meditate with their eyes wide open, which you can do. I always find that looks terrifying, though. I don't know why you would do that, but people do that, and it works for them. And let's see what else. Yes. You know, a good recollection when we're sitting is that when we sit like a Buddha. And I'm going to tell the Buddha story about the Buddha sitting underneath the Bodhi tree of enlightenment, striving for freedom, for enlightenment, for the end of suffering. And so that's a really good recollection for us too, as we're doing this practice of loving kindness to open our heart, to end our suffering. We can even picture ourselves sitting underneath the Bodhi tree of enlightenment as well. So feel free to do that and relax and don't struggle with anything. If you find yourself struggling with your posture or your mind and all the thoughts, just straighten your back, open your eyes, take a deep breath, and close your eyes again and start again. What I love about this practice is that you can always start again. No one is demanding perfection from you. So you can give up that pursuit of perfection for now and just do your best. Okay. Get my timer ready. Big grief. Oops. Okay, I gotta do this. Okay. Let's begin. So again, just allow your eyes to close. Making sure that you have that posture that's nice and comfortable and sustainable for you. So just start to pay attention to the breath. Focusing your breath at the base of the nostrils, feeling the air go in and out as you breathe. Maybe taking a nice deep breath all the way in and all the way out. Not forcing the breath, letting the breath be quite easy and natural for now. Just for the next couple of minutes, just rest in the sensations of the breath. And so to begin our practice of metta, of loving kindness, we're first going to think of a benefactor. And a benefactor is anyone who has shown us great love and great kindness. And all we're going to do is wish this person or these people happiness and goodwill simply by radiating. We're going to radiate a beam of loving kindness from your heart to theirs. Even smiling when you do so, wishing them happiness, and just radiating that beam of loving kindness to them, emanating from your heart. It could be any color of a beam, any vibration. So now we'll just do this practice for our benefactor. And now you can use the same benefactor or a different one. And now you're going to imagine this benefactor doing this practice for you. If they've meant that much to you, if they've been that kind to you, it must mean that they love you very much. And they do. You would be amazed and astounded at the amount of love people have for you. So we're going to see if we can let that in. So just imagine your benefactor radiating a beam of loving kindness from their heart to yours. And sometimes it helps to put your hand over your heart to see if you can actually receive this loving kindness from your benefactor. Can you do that? Can you receive it, or is there any resistance? It's okay if there's resistance. Can you then breathe into that to try to loosen or soften that resistance, to let more of that loving kindness in from your benefactor? I bet you can. So we'll just let our benefactor do this practice for us. Now shifting our focus just a little bit. And now we're going to do this practice of loving kindness for ourselves. We can either imagine sending ourselves loving kindness, or we can just say traditional phrases like, may I be happy, may I be safe from inner and outer danger, may I be well in body and mind, may I be at peace and live at ease in this world. If there's any resistance, can you soften there too? And then finally, we can just give away all of our loving kindness and send all of our loving kindness to either all beings in all directions, or even a certain group of people if you know they could use our thoughts of loving kindness, like frontline workers dealing with coronavirus, whomever they may be. The people and family of people fighting this disease, fighting this virus, or any group of people that's comfortable for you to do this practice for. We'll just end this Practice of loving kindness, friendliness, and goodwill with that. So just open your eyes when you're ready. And let's take the next 45 seconds out in silence, or maybe 1 minute, as you stretch your arms and you stretch your legs. If you have any, I'll take a couple of quick questions before we start the Buddha story, if you want. If not, then we'll just get right into it. Yeah, let's do that. You can always ask questions after the story too, so it's okay. I'm gonna go get a tissue. Okay, so like I said, I'll take a couple of questions. if you have a couple of quick ones, and we'll get into the story. If not, then
So there is a question.
Okay.
I don't necessarily know how quick it would be, but
that's okay.
Daniel asked,
Daniel.
what is the meaning of the sutta where Buddha tells Ananda that if he wanted to, he could live until the end of the age? And then later Ananda asks him to live till the end of the age, and the Buddha says it's too late for that.
It's too late for that. I gave you several chances, Ananda. Several chances. Several hints. But I could live to the end of the age if someone would just ask me. But then I passed the point of no return. It's too late now. That was the Buddha. And that's actually part, what the story I'm going to tell you today is the Buddha's Enlightenment story. From when he was born until he became an enlightened being at the age of 35. This story is called from what's called the Parinirvana Sutra. And it's the last year of the Buddha, the last year of the Buddha's life. He does like a farewell tour. He's 80 years old at this time and not feeling great. And, to live it till 80, in 500 BC is miraculous. He tells Ananda, he gives him several hints that I could, just through sheer willpower, stay alive until the end of the age. But Ananda, he's so attached to the Buddha. He's not a fully enlightened being. And so this is part of the Ananda story, which I can tell. This is part of the Parinirvana Sutra story, which I can also tell. They're kind of really linked. He doesn't get the hint until it's too late. And then he finally gets the hint and he asks, hey, can you stay alive until the end of the age? And the Buddha goes, well, it's too late now, dude. I gave you some hints. But they're both really beautiful stories. And both stories I can definitely tell if you want me to tell them. Since last week, since Marisa asked me to tell the story, I remember I love telling stories. And because it's a way that I learn really well, it's a method when teaching that I employ with a great deal of joy. I love telling the story, and I love telling stories, and especially these Buddhist stories. They're so just magnificent, and especially the Buddha story is really a story of the hero's journey. There are so many of these stories. The story of Jesus is the hero's journey, and Muhammad as well. So let's. Any more questions or no? Is that it?
That was it.
All right. So hopefully, David, that answered your question. If you want, if you guys want more stories, maybe I'll just do it anyway, since I like doing this so much. I have nothing else to do. I can shorten my loving kindness meditation and just do the Buddha story. And so really quickly, let's get into just a little bit of history. And it's not necessary for this story, but I don't know, for some reason, it really sets the stage for me. India in, let's say, around 1800, 1700 BC, there was this group and they were called the Indo-Aryans. And they were from Central Asia, and they did kind of this great migration down to the Indian subcontinent. And they settled in different places, and they came into like northern India, northern and kind of centralish India, and they settled with the people there. And they're the ones who brought the caste system, who brought their gods and their religion and their spiritual practice with them. And everything really takes place in central northern India. Southern India at the time was, I think, like an Iron Age civilization or Bronze Age civilization. I'm not exactly sure which one. But when we talk about India back then, we're really just talking about the Indian subcontinent, like from central India, kind of north into like what is now Afghanistan and Pakistan and Nepal, Tibet, Silk Road. So that's kind of where it all started. And at the time where the story takes place, India was going through this great spiritual renaissance. You know, the highest caste in the caste system was the Brahmin caste. And people were getting really disillusioned with the Brahmin caste because they were becoming really, really corrupt. It was really just kind of all about money. Not unlike now. Where, you know, if you wanted this like bad luck to be taken away, if you wanted a ceremony for your crops to have a good yield, or a good planting, if you wanted like a blessing for your family, you had to pay the Brahmins something, right? You had to pay them like 500 cows or 300 sheep or, you know, or something like that. It was really, really expensive. Women generally weren't permitted to do spiritual practice, so they had to pay the Brahmins to do the spiritual practice, to intercede, you know, to the gods on their behalf. And what's really interesting is that, you know, if you know anything about Hinduism, or it's not even Hinduism, that's not even the right word. It's called the Sanatana Dharma, which is what Hinduism is known by. The gods back then and the gods now are really somewhat different. Like now, Vishnu is part of the triumvirate of gods, like Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma. But back then, Vishnu was a very minor god. And some of the gods, you know, now didn't even exist back then. So, you know, things evolve over time, and that's super groovy. It's just a construction of the divine, so it's just not a problem. So our story begins in about 563 BC in the Sakyan Kingdom, which is now in Nepal. And in the capital city of Kapilavatthu, there was a king, Sudhana, and his wife, Maya. And they were a childless couple, which was a really big deal because everything is about succession, you know, in the families there. And, you know, the Sakyan Kingdom wasn't a big, giant kingdom, but they're a very proud kingdom. And, you know, being a childless couple, they prayed and they prayed and they prayed for a child. And one night, Queen Maya had this dream. And she had this dream where this white tusker elephant came and had this lotus in its trunk. And it came and descended into her right side. And then they asked the local sage what that meant. And he said that, oh, you were with child. You were with child. And they were really, really happy because she was with child. And she had this wonderful, painless kind of pregnancy, one that you could only dream about today. And when it came time for her to give birth, the tradition at the time was that you went to your mother's homeland to give birth. So it was time for her to give birth. And so what she did was she packed up everything, and she packed up all of her clothes and her servants and her animals and her security detail, this big old group of people, and they set off to her mother's homeland to have this baby. I think that was a parrot. But they didn't make it all the way. They got to this small town, small village called Lumbini, and she goes, I have to get out now. This baby is coming right now. And so she gets out of her carriage, and she goes instinctively to this tree. And she's leaning up against this tree, and the branch of the tree instinctively just lowers. And she grabs the branch of the tree. And this is how she has the child. The child emerges from her right side in the most painless way. And the child comes out steps in front of the mother, takes 7 steps forward, raises his hand to the heavens and says, this is my last birth. And when he was born, the earth shook and trembled because a new world sage has been born. And, since they didn't have to go to her mother's, they all packed up and they went back to the Sakyan kingdom. And unfortunately, 7 days later, Queen Maya passed away. Now, at the time of his birth and the earth shaking, it awakened this sage in the mountains. His name was Asita. And Asita was awakened, like I said, by this shaking of the earth, and he knew that something was up. And as everyone made their way back to the Sakyan kingdom, he made his way down from the mountain. And when he got down from the mountain, he demanded of the king to show him the baby, right? And since he was a Brahmin, and the king was just in the warrior class, which is 1 caste down from the Brahmin caste, the king, even though he was a noble king and a fighter and a warrior, he just had to do whatever the Brahmin said. And so the Brahmin says, I need to see this child right now. And the king says, as you wish. And so he shows him the child, and he inspects him very closely. And the king asks him, well, what do you see? And Asita goes, well, you see, there are 2 possibilities here. Now, either he will unite all the warring kingdoms of India and become leader of the entire continent, because at the time India was just a bunch of warring kingdoms, Or, he said, he'll become a great wheel-turning sage, a great spiritual leader. And then the king noticed that Asita had tears in his eyes. And he asks Asita, well, why are you crying? What's the matter? And he goes, this child's going to do so much, and I'll never live to see it because I'm too old. And so with the tears in his eyes, he went back up to the mountain. And so the king had a decision to make. Does he raise him to be a warrior like him? Or is he going to be a great wheel-turning sage, a great spiritual leader? So which do you think the king chose? Warrior, right? Absolutely. My child's going to be a warrior. I absolutely do not want him to be this spiritual leader. And so the king hatched this plan, this genius plan. He said that, all right, if this child sees any suffering whatsoever, compassion will rise in his heart and he'll want to become a great spiritual leader. So I'm going to train my son to be a great warrior. He'll never see any suffering, experience any suffering. And he didn't. As the Buddha would later recount, he says, I was very delicately brought up. Very delicately. He had a sunshade over him to protect him from the sun and the dust and the heat and the cold. His father built 3 palaces for him, one for the summer, one for the winter, one for the rainy season. And these palaces had these beautiful fountains of blue lotuses, red lotuses, white lotuses. And everything that he saw was new and young. If a flower that was in the garden started to wilt, it was plucked, because he didn't want him to see anything that was dying and getting old. All of the people in the palace were young. The palaces were filled with dancing girls, distractions to take his mind, off, any suffering whatsoever. The people of any age we ever really saw were his mother and his father. They couldn't stop that, but everything else, everyone, everything was young, was new. He didn't want for anything. He had whatever he wanted to eat. Any distraction he wanted to partake in, he could. And all this time, his father was still raising him to be a great warrior. And they named this child Siddhartha. And Siddhartha means one who accomplishes his goals. And Siddhartha was very, very good at being a warrior. Every warrior aspect that he was trained in, he was excellent at. Wrestling, hand-to-hand combat, archery, horseback riding, battle strategy. Everything he was good at. And because he was a prince, he was also instructed in the ways of the Dharma at the time, of the Vedic Dharma at the time. So he had some of that as well. What's interesting is one of his teachers was named Kandanya. And so remember that name, Kandanya, because he will become very relevant in a short amount of time. Right? We're going to see him later. And so he was very good at everything. And he lived this way for a really long time. He got married at 16 to this beautiful, beautiful woman, Yashodhara. This beautiful girl. And they were deeply in love with each other. And so he lived this way for, again, a long time. And so this story picks up when he's 29 years old. He's lived this amazingly suffering-free life. And he's out there one day, and he's practicing his archery, bullseye, bullseye, bullseye. He was good at everything. But he was bored. And he goes to his best friend and charioteer, Chana. He goes, Chana, let's go out into town. And Chana goes, yeah, no, we can't go out in town. Your father doesn't want you there. I mean, of course his father doesn't want him there. He's going to see suffering that happens, right? Most likely. He's been out in town before, you see, but every time he went out in town before, his father cleared away any sign of suffering. Everyone was young and happy to see him. So his father really couldn't control the narrative if he just kind of went out into the city willy-nilly. And then, for some reason, it never bothered Siddhartha, but he said, Chana, let's go, right now. I want to go. I'm bored. After 29 years, he's finally bored. And so Chana goes, all right, I have to do what you say, so we'll go. And so he goes and he sees the first of the four messengers. And so he's out in town and everything is fine. The people look great and they appear happy to see him. And suddenly he sees this person he's never seen before. And their hair is gray and they're hunched over and their legs are just kind of really thin and rickety, and his hands were all knotted, and he's holding this cane and he's using the cane to help him walk, and he's kind of bent over like this and he's walking. And Siddhartha had never seen anything like that before, so he goes, Chana, what's that? And Chana goes, oh, well, that's an old person. And Siddhartha goes, old person? What do you mean old person? He goes, that's an old person. That's a person who's lived many years. And when you've lived many years, this is kind of how you look. And he was horrified. He had never seen anything old before or anyone old before. And so he goes to Chana. Well, does everyone get like this? And Chana goes, of course everyone gets like this. Everyone gets old. Your parents are going to get old. You're going to get old. I'm going to get old. And this really just kind of upsets him a great deal. And he goes back and tells his father, who's pissed at Chana, by the way. And he tries to soothe him by putting on a play kind of that night, or some sort of entertainment, kind of making fun of old people. Don't worry, it's not going to happen to you. Ha, 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 old people. You know. But it still really bothers him. But he just kind of lets it go. And then a little while later, he's with Chana again, and he goes, Chana, let's go out into town again. And Chana goes, I don't think this is a good idea. You know, so he's protesting, you know, because he knows what happened the last time. And he goes, look, we're going out in town again. Let's go right now. And he goes, okay. So he goes out again. And so he sees an old person, like, check, old person, gotcha, right? Not happy about it, but yeah, I see it. And then later, he passes by and he sees a person who's kind of lying on the side of the road, and he's coughing, and he's like, skin was pale, and he's coughing, and he's wheezing, and all this kind of phlegm is coming out of his body, and he's just very, very ill. But he's never seen anything like that before. So he goes, Chana, what's wrong with that person? He goes, oh, that's a sick person. That's a person who's not well, who has an illness, who probably needs a doctor or physician. And then he gets like really upset. He goes, well, sick. He had never seen sick before. He goes to Chana, does everyone get sick? And Chana goes, of course everyone gets sick. Everyone gets sick. You're going to get sick. Your parents are going to get sick. They probably have been sick. I'm going to get sick. I've been sick. This is just what happens. And again, he's upset. He goes to his father. His father tries to console him, still pissed at Chana. And puts on another kind of entertainment play, kind of making fun of sick people. Oh, this is not going to happen to you. Don't worry. But, you know, kind of the die has been cast already, you know. So this, you know, compassion is really starting to well up in him. Then a little while later, it's the same thing. Chana, let's go out in town. They go out in town. He sees old person, gotcha. Sick person, right on, got it. And then he sees something he had never seen before. This seemingly human just on the side of the road, not breathing, all the color gone out of him. Just there, lifeless. And he goes, Chana, what's that? And Chana goes, that's a dead person. That's a person who's no longer living. And, you know, again, you know, Siddhartha goes, well, does this happen to everybody? He goes, of course this happens to everybody. It's going to happen to me. It's going to happen to your parents. It's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to your beautiful bride, Yashodhara. It's going to happen to everybody. Everyone is born and they get old and they get sick and they die. You know? And they're born again. Because this idea of reincarnation, it was reincarnation to them, at the time was nothing new. And it was nothing that it was, you know, not a surprise to really anybody, right? It was pretty common to believe in that. As he's getting really upset, play doesn't do him any good. Right? No good. And then finally they go out for a fourth time, and a final time. And so he sees all of the other things, but he also sees something very, very curious. He sees this man, kind of old. You know, and a lot of times back in the day, these ascetics, these holy men, would let their hair grow like really, really, really long. You know, and what they would do is, you know, because there's no zafus back then, right? They would bundle their hair up and they would sit on their hair, and that's their cushion. That's the cushion that they would sit on, like a meditation cushion, a zafu. And he was there, and he was sitting there in this kind of pose of meditation with his eyes closed. And he asks, Chana, who is that man? Well, and he goes, well, he's a holy man. He's an ascetic, and he's looking for an escape from old age, sickness, and death, from this cycle of birth and death and rebirth that we all go through. And he asks Chana, well, do you think that this is possible? That this can happen? And Chana goes, I think so. I mean, he certainly thinks so. And all of a sudden, this incredible compassion wells up at him for the first time. This much compassion. It is like overwhelming for him. Overwhelming. And he says, I need to find a way out of old age, sickness, and death. Not just for me, but for all beings. He had this compassion for all beings, not just for himself. But there was a problem, you see. He wanted to go out on this path away from the kingdom as he discovered the world and find this path of liberation, this escape from old age, sickness, and death that apparently all these holy men were looking for. But he was married, and he had just had a child just a week ago. He went back and he told his father and his stepmother, Pajapati, she's another story, of his plans, and they were very upset. They were like, no, you can't go. I am raising a warrior, and you're going to disrupt all my plans. Who am I going to give my kingdom to now? But his mind was made up. His compassion was so strong. His heart grew so big. And he made up his mind that he was going to go. And that night, he went into his bedchamber and he saw his beautiful wife lying there. And he saw that his son was lying there next to his mother, looking so beautiful and so peaceful and so serene. And he thought to himself, I think I have to go. I have to go. And he would say later, I didn't go up to my wife and kiss her on the cheek to say goodbye. And I didn't hold my son one last time. Because if I would have done those things, I would never have gone. I would have stayed. And so what he did was, since the child was 1 week old, was 7 days old, the tradition of the time was to hold off on the naming until 7 days. So he said, I name you Rahula. And Rahula means fetter, shackle, ball and chain. And he named him this on purpose because he saw this child, as beautiful as this child was, he would keep him chained to this life if he stayed. Such was his love for him. But he couldn't stay. And so he took Chana and he left. With his horse, he jumped over the palace wall and he went out into the forest, deep into the forest, and he took off all of his clothes because he had the finest clothes. He took all of his fine clothing off. He took a knife or a sword and he cut off all of his hair. So he resembled a monk. He put on these tattered robes that he got. And he went out searching. And he said, tell my father I love him. And then, with tears in his eyes, Chana goes, as you wish, sir. And he went off. And so Siddhartha went to go looking for enlightenment. And he knew that he needed to find a teacher. And the great thing about the spiritual renaissance that India was going through at the time was that you couldn't shake a stick in the forest without hitting a teacher, without hitting a guru, without hitting 20 gurus. They were everywhere, all searching for the same thing. So he found this one teacher. His name was Alara Kalama. And he started studying under Alara Kalama, and he got really, really good. He was really good at meditation, Siddhartha was. And Alara Kalama was really good too. He could reach this meditative state called nothingness. And it's the third of the 4 formless states in Buddhist meditation. And it's a very high state. And so after a while, the Buddha knew his Dharma, Alara Kalama's Dharma, and he knew his meditation technique. And he can get to the state of nothingness really, really easily. And he can stay there for a long time. But the problem was, when he opened his eyes and came out of meditation, he was still suffering. He was still lusting, and he was still missing his wife, and he was still missing his child, and he was still missing his family. And so after a while, he asked Alara Kalama, well, have you taught me everything that you know? And Alara Kalama says, yes, what you know, I know, or what I know, you know. He goes, well, thank you so much, Guru, for your teachings, but I must take my leave of you because I have not found my answer. And Alara Kalama goes, no, wait. Tell you what, we can share, we can co-lead the Sangha. We can both lead the Sangha. You and I will just share it. Right? You're so good, I can't lose you. And Siddhartha goes, I'm sorry, I need to take my leave of you. Thank you for everything. And so he goes wandering off in the forest again, and then he finds this other teacher. This other teacher's name is Udaka Ramaputra. And Udaka Ramaputra, wonderful Dharma teacher, wonderful meditator, he can get to the 4th formless state just before enlightenment, and it's called neither perception nor non-perception. I don't even know what that is. But that's the state, that's what they call it, neither perception nor non-perception. Right? And so he learned Udaka Ramaputra's Dharma, he learned his meditation technique, and he was really, really, really good at it. But again, the same thing happened. He would open his eyes and come out of meditation, he's still suffering. Right? So after a while, he asks Udaka Ramaputra, have you taught me everything that you know? And he goes, yes, what I know, you know. And Siddhartha goes, well, then I must take my leave of you. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful teacher, and I appreciate everything that you've done, but I have not found my answer. And Udaka Ramaputra goes, wait, stop. Tell you what, you can be the leader of this Sangha, and I'll be your student. You're so good at this. You probably know more than I do anyway. Please stay. That's a lot of temptation right there, isn't it? But Siddhartha goes, no, I haven't found my answer, and I must take my leave of you. And so he studied with 2 teachers. He didn't find what he was looking for. Close, but he didn't find what he was looking for. And so he decided he would just go do this on his own. And he met up with 5 buddies of his, who he had known from before, one of which was his old teacher Kandanya, his old Vedic teacher Kandanya. And so those 6, Siddhartha and the other 5, they started just kind of hanging out together and meditating, and they made a pact. And they said, whoever finds enlightenment first will come back and teach the others how they did it. So they made a pact to stick together, and whoever found enlightenment first would tell the others how he did it. I said, okay. So at the time, the conventional wisdom was, if you punish your body enough, you will disassociate yourself from the body. And that's how you find enlightenment. That's how you find a way out of sickness, old age, sickness, and death. And so that's what they did. And so for 6 years, that's what Siddhartha did. Meditating in the heat, in the cold, meditating in the rain, meditating in the snow, meditating upside down, meditating on dead bodies, which is what they did in what they call a charnel ground. A charnel ground is kind of like a cemetery where they just kind of flung the dead bodies that were just kind of hanging out there. No caskets, no coffins, no burial, no nothing. They were just there, and they would get picked apart by the jackals and the other wild animals. They would meditate standing on one leg. And they would meditate in all these crazy positions and all these crazy elements, and they would eat very little. Some of the stories say 1 handful of rice a day, or even 1 grain of rice a day. Drinking very little, if at all. They were really just punishing their bodies, and so many people died like this. But this was the only way that they knew how to do it. And so our friend Siddhartha was very, very sick after 6 years of this. And he looks like this guy here. His legs and arms were like twigs. His eyes were sunken in. His hair was like falling out and was just dry. He was incredibly skinny. It said that when you touched his belly skin, you could feel his spine. And when you touched his spine, you could feel his belly skin. But that's the only way he knew, so he just kept on doing that. And one day, he was there, sitting, meditating, near death. And this farm girl came by. Her name was Sujata. And Sujata happened to have a bowl of rice milk and saw Siddhartha sitting there. And this compassion welled up in her, and she immediately went up to him and said, "Hello, sir. Please, I have some rice milk here. Please eat this. You're going to die if you don't. Please have this." And Siddhartha thought, well, I'm near death. What I've been doing for the last 6 years has not been working. I'm really no closer to freedom than I was 6 years ago. Maybe if I take this rice milk and get a bath and regain my strength, I could come up with a new plan, a new strategy. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. So he actually takes the rice milk and he drinks and he eats. And his 5 friends did not like what they saw. They started chastising him and calling him a food eater. Siddhartha's a food eater. You're a food eater, Siddhartha. You're a sellout. You're not serious about finding liberation at all if you're eating this rice milk. How could you betray us like this? And they left him. They went off somewhere else and they wanted nothing to do with him. So he drank the rice milk and he drank some more and he drank some more and he took a bath. He got some new robes. His hair started growing back. He gained a little bit of weight. And he was kind of feeling a little bit of his old self again, so we can find some new strategy. But he didn't have a new strategy. He didn't know any other new strategy. Right? And so he had this just incredible determination. He sits down under this peepal tree, which is now known as the Bodhi tree of Enlightenment. And he sits down and he goes, I have no idea how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to sit under this tree until I find liberation, until I find the end of suffering, until I find the end of old age, sickness, and death. And it was the first time in his life where he completely surrendered. He absolutely, completely surrendered, saying, I have no idea how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do this. And so he sits. And he sits. And he sits. And it's starting to work. It's starting to work. He's getting there. And he knows he's getting there. And Mara also knows he's getting there. And Mara's pissed. For those of you who don't know who Mara is the tempter god. He is that guy who keeps us chained to this series of old age, sickness and death, birth and rebirth, time after time after time, the samsaric cycle. He's the tempter god. And he knows that Siddhartha is getting close. So he goes, I can't let this happen. And so I need to test him. I need to break him from his concentration because Siddhartha is sitting underneath this tree, absorbed in the bliss. And so Mara's first test is a test of anger. And so Mara summons all of his army, and all of his army hurls these spears and arrows at Siddhartha, who's unmoved, unchanged from his concentration. And he just like that, touches these arrows and spears, and they turn to flower petals at his feet. And he passes the first test, and Mara's not happy. He goes, oh, well, okay, anger, okay. You can probably solve anger, but you can't solve this. This is another good one. And so the daughters of Mara appear at his feet in front of him and start dancing very seductively, trying to disturb Siddhartha from his concentration. So he's tempting him with lust, but it didn't work. He didn't move. And the daughters of Mara turned to stone. Now he's really mad because anger didn't work and lust didn't work. And so Mara goes, I know, this always works. And his last weapon was the weapon of doubt. And he goes to Mara, he goes to Siddhartha, and he goes, who do you think you are? You know who I am. Who do you think you are who to escape my grasp? Who do you think you are that you think you deserve this liberation and this freedom? Who? And our friend Siddhartha touches the ground, and the god Gaia comes up from the ground. He's bearing witness to the earth, you see. And Gaia comes up from the earth and he goes, I'll tell you who he is. He is one who has lived thousands of lifetimes doing good deed after good deed after good deed. Skillful action after skillful action after skillful action. If anyone deserves to be here, he does. I bear witness to him in all of his good deeds. And with that, Mara knew that he was defeated. And he leaves. So now it's the last night. And during the last night, you see, there are what they call 3 watches of the night. The first watch of the night is from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Then 10 p.m. to 2 p.m. and 2 p.m. to 6 a.m. Those are the watches of the night. And on the first watch of the night, he had the first of 3 recollections. And the first recollection was the recollection of his manifold past lives, all of his past lives. In this life, I was named this, and my clan was this, and my wife was this, and my children were named this, and here were my deeds. In this life, this was my clan, this was my name, here were my deeds. And he went back lifetime, 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 lifetime. But the interesting thing was, he couldn't go back to his first lifetime. It was too far back. Not even he could go that far back. There was no discernible beginning. And that's one of the reasons why there's no creation story in Buddhism. It's just all things, coming to existence and going out of existence, being born and being dead, whether it's people or world systems. And so that was the first watch of the night. And on the second watch of the night, he saw all of these people being born into this world, and being born into this world based on their karma, based on their actions. And some were positive and some were not. And he saw that there was this cycle. You see this cycle of birth and death. Like this causes this, causes this, causes this, causes this, and then you're suffering, and then causes this, and then causes this cycle of birth and death and rebirth to come all to circle back around again. And so he saw this chain, the 12 chain link chain of causation, 12-link chain of causation. You've heard of it as dependent co-arising, dependent origination, pratitya samuppada. And so that was the second watch of the night. And on the third watch of the night, the final watch of the night, he uncovers the way out of, not only the way out of suffering, but what the cause of the suffering is and the problem that we're having. And he discovers, or uncovers, I should say, uncovers, not discovers, uncovers the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. The first Noble Truth says that the problem that we're all trying to solve is this problem of suffering. He saw all these people trying their best, trying their hardest to free themselves from suffering, but doing the very things that cause suffering. And that was just really a vicious cycle, and that was the problem that all humanity is facing. And then he saw what the cause of the suffering was grasping and craving. Craving after this, craving after that. And then the third Noble Truth says that the end of suffering is possible. And the fourth Noble Truth says this is the path to the end of suffering, which is what we call the middle way. A path that's not too tight or too loose. The path of not these horrible ascetic practices that he was going through, but not the path of indulgence either. And then he was free. And the earth shook again. And he discovered so much that he just had to sit there and just kind of take it all in. So no one really knows how long he was there for. 7 weeks, I think, traditionally is what people say. But who knows? And so he's sitting there, and the thought came to him, maybe I don't teach. And with that thought, alerted the gods in the heavens, and one of them, Sahampati, came down from one of the Deva realms and implored the Buddha, or implored Siddhartha, who was now the Buddha, the awakened one, implored him to teach. He said, there are people with little dust in their eyes. They will get it. And so the Buddha, with now the ability to survey the world and the minds of everybody, saw, oh, yeah, there are people who will get this. And so he's sitting there, and after a while he gets up and he goes, okay, who do I teach? Who gets the first lesson? And then he remembers, oh yes, my buddies. We made this pact. We made this pact that whoever finds enlightenment first, he'll go and tell the other people. So, oh, okay. So he located them in the deer park near Benares. And so he starts walking that way. And on his way, he sees this guy who comes up to him. He goes, whoa, your skin is so luminous and fresh, and you just have this look about you. Who is your guru? He goes, I have no guru. I have found the ultimate freedom and enlightenment through my own efforts. He goes, well, may it be so. And may it be so is the current equivalent of, well, good for you. So he didn't really quite believe him. He just said, yeah, good for you, and he went on his way. So his first attempt at teaching failed. Because he thought that enlightenment is supposed to look a certain way, and he looked relatively ordinary. I mean, his skin was nice and glowing and things like that, but there was no big giant halo, and there was no angel singing, and there was no anything that he would expect to see from an enlightened master. And enlightenment is quite ordinary. And so he went on his way. And so the Buddha went on his way, and he finally found his buddies in the deer park. And his buddies saw him too, and he goes, oh, that's Siddhartha. Don't pay him any attention. Don't pay him any mind. Right? And so he gets closer, and they notice there's something different about him. And they go, well, we'll set a seat out for him, but that's it. And then he gets right up to them, and they know that something is up. And they go, Siddhartha, what happened to you? And he says, he chastises and goes, I am not Siddhartha. I am the Buddha, the awakened one. I have found the way out of old age, sickness, and death. A way out of this cycle of birth and rebirth. I have found the ultimate freedom. And I am here to teach you. And then, there, he gave his first sermon, which was the setting in motion of the wheel of Dharma. And the earth shook. And one of his students, one of the five, he could see when the Buddha was giving his instruction, was giving his talk, he could see it in his eyes. And the Buddha goes, Anya Kandanya, which means Kandanya knows. Kandanya knows, and Kandanya reaches that first level of enlightenment called stream entry right away. Right away. And of course, they all eventually did. And that is essentially where the story ends. Certainly the Enlightenment story ends. And as you know, he taught for 45 years. He taught all people from all castes, all walks of life, all languages, all were the same in his eyes. Man, woman, what race, nationality, language you spoke, anything. Because it was all just about the mind, not anything external. And I love that, and I love one of my favorite stories is about the Buddha's stepmother, Really, it's the Buddha's the only mother he ever knew since Queen Maya died 7 days after he was born. But there's a couple of things that I would like to read to you, if I can find my glasses. Oh, right here. Ah. So he took everybody. He just needed to know that they were serious about what they wanted to do. And these are stories of women. And I want to read you these stories because they're really, really important. And they come from a book in the Dharma called the Tarigata, and they're the Enlightenment stories of the women. There's the Tarigata and the Taragata, and so the Taragata is for the guys. But these for the, this is from Vimala, who is the former courtesan. And I love this story because it's pretty intense. And she goes, intoxicated with my complexion, figure, beauty, and fame, haughty with youth, I despised other women. Adorning this body, embellished to delude foolish men, I stood at the door to the brothel, a hunter with snare laid out. I showed off my ornaments and revealed many a private part. I worked my manifold magic, laughing at the crowd. Today, wrapped in a double cloak, my head shaven, having wandered for alms, I sit at the foot of a tree and attain the state of no thought. All ties, human and divine, have been cut. Having cast off all effluence, cooled am I, unbound. And so she's sitting here like I was a big giant hoe. And now I'm not. And I won't have shame about that previous life because it led me here. And so here are just a couple of others really quickly. This one is from Sumangala's mother. This is a wonderful, very short story here, or a short verse. And she goes, so freed, so thoroughly freed am I from my pestle, my shameless husband and his sunshade making, my moldy old pot with its water snake smell. Aversion and passion I cut with a chop. Having come to the foot of a tree, I meditate, absorbed in the bliss. What bliss? That's so beautiful. And the final story from the women here, this comes from, it's called the Soma Sutra, or from Sister Soma. It's a short story too. And it goes, at Shravasti, Soma the nun put on her robes and taking her bowl and outer robe, went into Shravasti for alms. When she had gone for alms and had returned from her alms round, after her meal, she went to the Grove of the Blind to spend the day meditating. Having gone deep into the Grove of the Blind, she sat down at the foot of a tree for the day's abiding. Then Mara, the evil one, wanting to arouse fear, horror, and terror in her, wanting to make her fall away from concentration, approached her and addressed her in verse, because it's always in verse. And Mara goes, that which is to be attained by seers, that place so very hard to reach, women can't, with their 2-inch discernment, attain. Mara's throwing down. Mara's trying to drop the mic on Soma here. So with your little 2-inch attainment, little Soma, who do you think you are? Then the thought occurred to Soma the nun. Now, who has recited this verse? A human being or a non-human one? Then it occurred to her, this is Mara, the evil one, who has recited this verse wanting to arouse fear, horror, and terror in me, wanting to make me fall away from concentration. Then, having understood that this is Mara, the evil one, she replied to him in verse, "What difference does being a woman make when the mind's well-centered, when knowledge is progressing, seeing clearly, rightly into the Dharma? Anyone who thinks I am a woman, or a man, or am I anything at all, that's who Mara's fit to address." Then Mara, the evil one, sad and dejected at realizing Soma the nun knows me, vanished right then and there. So she came right back at him, didn't she? And so that was the wonderful thing, where before women really weren't allowed to do spiritual practice. And this is another story. The very first nun was the Buddha's stepmother, Mahapajapati. These names get me confused sometimes. Mahapajapati. And that's another story that we can tell at a later time. But I wanted to include those stories at the end just because they're so kind of heart-wrenching, and they're intense, and they just really describe the humanity, really describe the human condition. So that's it. So that was it. Oh, great. So there are 900 versions of this story. If you think that I missed a part of the story or added a part of the story I didn't, it's just not the version maybe you heard yourself. There's a version that, there's part of the story that Jeff tells that I don't tell because I don't like it. Frankly, I don't like it. But it's actually a very popular part of the story. But it's very short, so I don't like to tell it. So I don't include it in my version. And so this is a wonderful story, and this is why we're here today. This is why we all come to the Dharma Bum Temple, to free ourselves from suffering. And I know I've gone way over, but that's okay. That's what the story is for. I don't pay any attention to time when I tell the story. So if you want to leave, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, or I'm happy to take any questions. If you've all have left and
Oh, they're still here.
are they still here? Whew. Oh my God, I love telling the story. This is so much fun. And I really it's such a joy for me to do and to tell. So these questions could be about the story, they could be about Buddhism. Hopefully I'll have an answer for you. We have one coming up.
So Marisa said, if you want to tell another story sometime, please tell the flower girl story and then share the part you leave out.
If you remember to ask me about the part to leave out, I'll tell you. But I leave it out on purpose unless someone wants me to tell it. And again, the reason why I leave it out is just because it's so misogynistic. Even though it's Buddhism and we're talking about, peace and love and end of suffering, blah, 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 it's still, over the years just became a very kind of patriarchal religion. The religion part became very patriarchal. And, in a lot of these stories, whether it's the story of Mahapajapati, the first nun, the Buddhist stepmother, or Malika, the flower girl queen, or any other woman that's featured prominently in a story, you'll see the kind of the parts that the men added to kind of not make them look so good. So I leave them out because it's stupid. It doesn't add anything to the story anyway. But yes, I'll tell that. So, if you want to know, if you want to hear any other stories, I could tell another story next week. You know what? I'm just going to tell another story next week. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm going to tell it. Maybe it's 2 stories. Maybe I'll tell like Angulimala and then Malika the Flower Girl Queen. So I can fit 2 stories in like 45 minutes or so. Yeah, I'll do that. I also want to tell you about Ananda. I want to tell you about Sariputra and Moggallana. I want to tell you about the Parinirvana Sutra, which is the last year of the Buddha. What David was talking about in that question he asked earlier on. Okay, you don't have to have a question, that's fine. Oh my God, you guys, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here with you guys. Again, I love each and every one of you. I wish you all the best. Please understand that what you're doing, wearing a mask, staying inside, staying away, socially distancing, all these things that you probably find so annoying and and painful and whatever it is helping other people. You're doing this for the well-being of others. So always remember that. Okay. Again, I love you all. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time. Bye now.